Alfonso, thank you so much for joining us today and agreeing to this Experts of the Americas interview. Hello, everyone. My name is Pepe Zen, Associate Director and Fellow at the Atlantic Council's Adrian Arch Latin America Center. Our center focuses on Latin America and the Caribbean's strategic role in a global context, but with a priority on especially pressing and political and socioeconomic issues that will define the trajectory of our region now and the years ahead. And in particular, in this moment, we're committed to helping the region using the COVID-19 pandemic as an inflection point to leapfrog economic development, thinking about both opportunities and challenges. It is for that reason that we have partnered with the Inter-American Development Bank to help understand the opportunities and the challenges that the private sector sees in this region, and of course, the critical role that the private sector plays and can continue to play in supporting economic recovery and long-term prosperity in Latin America and the Caribbean. This interview is a part of a conversation series with Latin American private sector leaders and Caribbean private sector leaders on these topics. Your insights today will provide input for upcoming Atlantic Council and IDB report. And today we're so pleased to have Alfonso with us, Alfonso Gomez, who is the CEO of Telefónica Hispam. We're so lucky to have you today with us, Alfonso. Thank you for taking the time to do this. And today's interview will focus more on Telefónica's perspective in the broader telecommunications, technology, digital sector. So with that, we'll begin. Alfonso, let me start out by asking your first question, which is, as we think about, as I mentioned, our center always think about Latin America and the Caribbean in a global context. So Telefónica being a global multinational company, let me ask you about Latin America as a region. And given your company's longstanding presence and commitment to our region, what are some of the unique factors that makes Latin America and the Caribbean such an important market for you, especially when compared to the other regions?
Thank you very much, Pepe. It's an honor to be here with you, and I'm very proud to participate in this conversation. It's a very important question. Telefónica started its long-standing relationship with Latin America 30 years ago. The region has contributed with Telefónica's growth over time, especially during the first decade of this century, the so-called golden decade. Even when macro conditions have worsened during the pandemic, our company continues to be a firm believer in the potential of the region. We see, in particular, a huge potential to be unlocked in the digital connectivity space. It is true that the region has long surpassed a mobile penetration rate of 100%, but it is still a space to grow in fiber connectivity and the deployment of 5G. The acceleration of digitalization forced by the pandemic meant that in 1 year, internet usage increased what was expected previously in 5. That being the case, however, according with the IDB, about 77 million citizens from 24 countries in the Americas do not have access to connectivity. Demand for digital infrastructures has increased as a result of the pandemic, and we are leading the new wave of deployments. Latin America is a region with almost 700 million people, particularly young, with some of the highest entrepreneurship rates of the world and with commercial and industrial structure based in SMEs. Under these conditions, digitalization is not an option, but a priority.
Thank you so much for that. I think the digitalization and all the opportunities that come with it is just very exciting for our region. And I'd love to be able to get into some of that later on today if we have time. Now, kind of switching gear a little bit and asking about not just the opportunities, but also challenges that face our region. And I think it's very important that you mentioned that companies like Telefónica stick with the region in its ups and downs. So let me ask you about the challenge, which is, what is a key social economic challenge that you see facing the region, and how has Telefónica sought to help address and mitigate this challenge?
Also very important, Pepe. Without a doubt, inequality is the biggest socioeconomic challenge that we face. Unfortunately, Latin America is by several accounts the most unequal region in the world. Inequality is expressed in different ways, not only by income differences, but also by differences in the access to services and infrastructures between the urban and rural areas, or in the access to education and jobs between genders. We believe that an important answer to this problem is digital inclusion. We see digitalization as a human-centric process that must take into account all the existing gaps. For these reasons, our commitment to the region considers imagining new ways to deploy infrastructures in underserved areas, promoting digital education to provide digital skills through Fundación Telefónica programs, and promoting diversity and gender equality in all our company's processes, among others. Telefónica has shown a long-term commitment as an investor. Our commitment to Latin America has always been characterized by efforts to democratize our services, and we have led the bet to offer prepaid products. We manage a variety of technologies to serve all segments, and our recent agreements for fiber deployments in Chile and Colombia are not only focused on capital cities, but also on small localities. In these countries, we are developing new wholesale business models that allow us to accelerate the deployment of fiber throughout our footprint by inviting important investors to join us.
Thank you for that, Alfonso. And I think this is critically important, right? We're talking about a region, perhaps the most income equal in the world, and the inequality in the region is, as you mentioned, very much multidimensional, depends on how you look at it. And at our center, we're undertaking a new body of work to look at this multidimensional inequality, and specifically how digitalization, and that means not just the hard infrastructure, but also skills, policy, like you mentioned, and including regulations, can help mitigate the sort of multidimensional inequality we see in the region instead of exacerbating it. So love to be able to talk to you in depth about this at a later point. But, something that you kind of alluded to in your response, is, companies cannot necessarily do all these things on its own, right? You mentioned your partnership with the Inter-American Development Bank and collaboration with the public sector. So let me tag on that point. As you think about partnerships, how does partnership play a critical role in achieving some of the goals and overcoming some of the regional challenges that you mentioned? And specifically, how does partnership with the public sector and multilateral organizations like the IDB look like? And how can these organizations, how can these partnerships make Latin America and the Caribbean more business and investment friendly for companies like yours?
That's absolutely true. We must work together. We believe public-private dialogue is essential, and the convening power of the IDB can facilitate the conversation. Regulatory frameworks and tax burdens in Latin America must be reviewed in order to build the models that Latin America needs to generate value and attract investment. We do not see consistency in the need for digital connectivity and the current regulatory frameworks and tax burdens to the industry that are higher than most other industries. The public sector and multilateral organizations such as the IDB can contribute to ensure legal certainty and regulatory and fiscal predictability as enablers for the deployment or the development of the regions, and also by supporting new models to solve the inclusion problem and expand what works, help develop and implement the best public policy practices in the region. An example is the need to ensure that the industry's tax burdens are not higher than other industries, considering the role and impact it has on the digitalization of the productive sector in the region, and guiding and supporting the implementation of the public policy best practices. For example, regulations, transparency, legal stability, profitability, access.
And Alfonso, I think this is spot on. I think we focus more on the digital / telecommunications sector for the moment, but a lot of these factors you mentioned, these are very much applicable and important for broader private sector players, almost sector agnostic. And when foreign investors and multinational companies look to operate in our region, our countries, these are a lot of the key factors they will look at. So thank you for sharing that. Next up, I want to ask you a question more on the business side. And you kind of alluded to this earlier about digitalization being such an important trend and opportunity coming out of the pandemic. And indeed, Fundación Telefónica have done a lot of work in these areas, studying these trends, and I'll be remiss not to mention your innovation hub, Guaira, which, if I understand correctly, operates in 7 countries in the region. So let me ask you on the business side, how is your company adapting to digital and other changes in the region, thinking that business models and customer needs have evolved throughout the pandemic and might continue to evolve going forward?
It's very important. Fundación Telefónica's Digital Society Report for Latin America, recently released, shows a region that has been intensely affected by the pandemic, but it also demonstrates the irreversible need that the region has to deepen the path towards digitalization to reduce access barriers, solve social and economic inequalities, and promote the transformation of economic activity. Our commitment to the digitalization focuses on the human aspect. That is why Fundación Telefónica is focused on digital education and reskilling, with such relevant initiatives as Profuturo, Conecta Empleo, or Escuela 42. We are building a digital innovation and talent hub in our headquarters at Telefónica District, If we only take care of digital infrastructure, Latin America risks to become only a consumer of digital products and services. We need to contribute to the development of a deeper digital ecosystem with content and digital services producers to make sure that our region is also a part of the supply side of the market. Telefonica Ventures and Wayran that you mentioned, where we also collaborate with the IDB, impact precisely on the entrepreneurial ecosystem, enabling the capital and support required to transform knowledge into business activity. Our history of alliances and collaboration with the IDB is long-standing. Our strategic relationship is being fruitful, and we wish to continue deepening these alliances with the IDB for the development of the region, with a focus on projects of inclusive connectivity and education.
That's just so great to hear, and I think some of the especially I think I concur with the point on making sure that our region and countries in the region do not stay on the consuming/consumer side of the business, but also are active contributors or suppliers of the business. I think that's absolutely critical going forward. Now, you've mentioned this in your answer to the last question and throughout this interview, which is the importance of expanding digital infrastructure. And when it comes to skills, which I almost consider as a soft infrastructure. So let me just cap off the interview with a question about that. We all understand, expanding digital access is so important for the region. And if I'm not mistaken, Telefonica has a very, very important project in collaboration with the IDB and private sector partners called Internet para Todos, to increase mobile connectivity. So tell us a little bit more about this project in particular, but more importantly, love to hear more about just, as a way of summarizing this conversation, how does building or expanding digital infrastructure, both hard and soft, fit into your company's broader priorities in this region of Latin America and the Caribbean?
It fits perfectly. Digital inclusion, and for digital inclusion, we understand to leave no one behind in the digitalization process is a central part of our business and sustainability strategy. Internet para Todos is a project of which we are deeply proud, not only because it is part of a disruptive model of alliances with the IDB, CAF, and Meta, but also because it has been an effective and efficient instrument to connect the unconnected with an innovative collaboration model. Internet para Todos has allowed us to demonstrate that there are mechanisms to expand coverage in a sustainable way. We have demonstrated that we can build a rural network to be used by all mobile operators, avoiding inefficient duplication of infrastructure. Today, Entel, Claro, and Telefonica are already using the network of Internet para Todos. We have shown also that by using disruptive technologies in an agnostic way, it is possible to reduce deployment costs and produce an attractive project. IDB has a fundamental part of this alliance, and we hope to be able to replicate this model in other Latin American countries. It is a priority for Telefonica to continue betting on this type of alliances that allow us to close the digital gap.
Thank you so much, Alfonso, for your very insightful response. I mean, I walked away from this interview with at least key takeaways, the digital inequality facing the region and the potential for digital inclusion and how that can help with other sectors and other forms of inclusion in the region. And second, the importance of partnership. But I think it was great to hear some of the specific examples that Telefonica is undertaking, not only on its own, but in partnership with other multilateral and private sector partners. So that was great to hear. Thank you again, Alfonso. It was a pleasure to hear from you and hear from the Atlantic Council. And of course, in collaboration with the IDB, we look forward to continue conversing with you and collaborating with you on these key issues for our region.
Thank you, Pepe. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure for us as well.